a little bit of Hollywood for you. Sync audio.
That was a gnat going by.
Okay, whenever you're ready, proceed.
Right. Sam, there's no right or wrong answers here. This is
Okay.
you in Wentworth. But as long as I've known you, I really don't know that much about you. You know, who is Sam Ratcliffe?
Well, I'm an only child. I was born in Chillicothe, Missouri. That's about 70 miles from here. And that's why I first came to Wentworth to summer camp when I was 10 years old. I came down 2 summers. And my dad was in business up there, but he lost his health, and we had to move to Colorado. And when he did, it's when I came to Wentworth to have a home. My mother was teaching school, he was in a hospital, and my mother wanted me to be around the men of Wentworth as an influence, and that they were. And Wentworth became a home. I loved the environment. I liked the regimentation. There wasn't a thing I didn't like except study hall, because I was not a good student. Wentworth was a boon to me because I had to sit down and study every night, and we had small classes. But it was the regimentation, the organization, and most importantly, the people. You know, I've often thought when I've given speeches and given a sermon about defining points in our life. We've all had them. You know, marriage, graduation from school, children, jobs. But the defining point in my life was coming to Wentworth. And I don't know, it just fit. Me and Wentworth were a fit. I never had a problem. I can only think of one person at Wentworth I didn't get along with. That was one cadet. I got along with everybody, and I liked everybody. And the instructors, the adults were so influential in my life. Like we were talking earlier about Colonel Sellers Sr. You know, I took his Latin class when I was a freshman in high school. I was lost. There were a bunch of smart, older kids in there, but just in his presence. But that's an interesting point. I didn't realize what a hero he was. And when I was in school, you know, he had all the ribbons, he didn't mean anything. But after I got in the military, I realized what those awards were. And I was in awe that the man used to put his hand on my shoulder and call me Sammy. You know, everybody called me Sammy for years. They still do, and that was fine with me. But that was it. And of course, when I came to Wentworth, I was a gym rat. You know, athletics were a big part of my life. I played football, basketball, ran track all the way through school and college, and that gave me the opportunity to go on and play college football. It was a Division II, but still it was college football. And there again, friends. But Wentworth, it was a defining point in my life. Like I said, there was so much to it. You know, I think of the people, like your father. My coaches, Paul B. Theris, Bill Coulter, Merle Gibson, and Jim Wyckoff, what an influence they had on me. I learned so much from them, discipline and hard work and suck it up and shut up. Excuse that's rather crude, but that's what it got down to, you know. And I learned to take orders and get in line, do what I'm told to do. And then instructors such as Steve Hagan, Clyde Etter, you know, made such a difference. When I came back to teach years later, those two men were the model I used when I stood in front of a class of Clyde Etter and Steve Hagan, and there were so many others. You know, Bob Hepler was good, but everybody was just so good. But to me, as a little kid, I had 3 meals a day, got my laundry done, I had a warm place to sleep. What more could I ask for? You know, and I think all the things that Wentworth allowed me to go on in life and be as successful as I was. Excuse being my vanity, but I had a good life. You know, I left Wentworth and I got a degree, went in the Army. I put everything I could in the Army and so I could get everything out of it. I got to go to study Southeast Asia twice. and that was an experience. Met a lot of nice people. And then when I left the military, I worked for a major corporation, a Fortune 500 company for 20 years. And they send me a check every month, whether I need it or not. But when I retired, when Norma Marion called me and asked me about coming back, my wife, who was from Kansas, said, well, you've had your military career, you've had your business career, why not go back? And I was so glad to come back. And the idea was to give back, the term now is give forward, but to give back to the cadets what I was given. Times have changed, kids were different. We had cell phones and things of that nature, but still, and I think when I stood in that classroom, it was like I hadn't left, and I wanted them to get the benefits I had. Get up every morning when you're supposed to, make your bed, shave, make sure your uniform was right, your shoes were shined. These are things that lasted me all my life, and I wanted to impart that on other kids. When I came back to school, the lifestyles had changed, and a lot of kids came to Wentworth for different reasons than when I went to school. But that's it. You asked, now I. Okay.
Okay. Let's back up a little bit. Some questions early on. You grew up in Chillicothe.
Right. I went to grade school there.
Did you have any siblings?
No, I'm an only child.
Only child. And how did you find out? Your parents found out about Wentworth?
Well, Colonel Wyckoff was from Chillicothe, and somehow my dad encountered him, and that's how they. In my day, way back when, in the day, there was church camp, Boy Scout camp, and Wentworth. And I came down there for 2 years and played Indian. I had an Indian name, and we used to dance around the fire every night, and had a lot of fun. We had the swimming pool, the only swimming pool in the county. We had a gym, and we made all these Indian accoutrements, and I enjoyed that. And the horseback riding, and that's where I learned how to play golf. And But when my dad lost his health, we moved to Colorado, and that's when I came to Wentworth. My mother wanted me to be around the men at Wentworth. And
okay. So you mentioned you had a name at summer camp?
I was Morning Star. I don't get up early enough to see the stars, so I can't see Morning Star. But I enjoyed that. I really did. We used to dance around the fire every night. And during the day, we'd make our equipment and accoutrements, and just act like a bunch of dumb little kids. But it was good. But we wore a uniform, and we marched, and we had etiquette, things that just ingrained in me that you will do, and that's the way life is. And I think it started there. I know one of my grade school pictures in Chillicothe, I was wearing my summer camp uniform of khakis and a tie.
And you mentioned earlier one of the powwows you had to ride a horse?
Well, we used to have these Indian ceremonies in the stadium, these big affairs. And I was thinking about the other day, I had to go out to the stables, because Wentworth had stables that had horses, and I had to ride a horse into it, and they danced around, and all of a sudden they stopped and looked and pointed like that, and there I was, riding a horse between two teepees, and I ran off in the dark. Why do I remember things like that, but I can't remember my own name?
Okay. You mentioned that you went to a different school after Wentworth and got your degree.
After I came back, I went down to, when I graduated high school, I went down to Tucson, where my folks lived. And I went out for football. I was on the football team, but that's about all I was doing. That working, and I wasn't making good grades. And when my father was killed in an automobile accident, I dropped out of school. Well, that was in the early 60s. It wasn't very long at the draft board sent me a note that said, you are now classified 1A. And after my experience in Wentworth, I said, I don't want to be a private. I know what it's like. I'm halfway to be an officer, and I couldn't take ROTC because I wasn't a junior. So I got my father's insurance money and I called Colonel Wyckoff. I came back to Wentworth just to get my ROTC and my commission. Then I went on to Northwest, under the influence of Paul B. Theris and Bill Coulter, where they'd gone to school. I went to Northwest Missouri State. I went up there to play football. And oh, by the way, I got a degree also.
Okay. Now, when you mentioned that athletics were really important to you at Wentworth, can you talk a little bit about, because I know you played basketball and football and ran track. We've got film of that. Who were your coaches and what?
Well, my first coach was Jim Wyckoff, Colonel Wyckoff's eldest son, for junior high school. And then a fellow named Al Hammer was just here a couple of years. And then Bill Coulter and Paul B. Theris and Merle Gibson. And they had a big influence on me. You know, they were all combat veterans. And I didn't think so much at the time, but I realized what they had seen in combat was on the football field was nothing. And I learned a lot from that. That, you know, excuse the expression, suck it up. You know, they could be worse. And when I got in combat myself later on in life, I thought about that. And I used to think, it could be worse. You know, what would, and that was the influence of Colonel Sellers. He had played football at the University of Chicago, and many people didn't realize. But I often thought, not only in combat, but in business, what would Colonel Sellers do? Would he approve of what I'm doing now? That may sound silly. I was a long way away, but the impressions of that man so many years ago and what he had done and the image he projected to not only me, but to everybody. He was truly an educated Southern gentleman. He really was. And so many others, you know.
Okay, you're doing great, Sam. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about when you came back and you got your commission. Do you remember, take us forward from your commissioning and you went in the service, you ended up in the Special Forces.
Well, when I I got my commission, I became an infantry officer because I was influenced by several of the RTC instructors here and Colonel Sellers. They'd been in the infantry, and I figured that's where the people were, and that's where the enemy was. So I went in the infantry, became a paratrooper, went to Special Forces, and the Army was easy. After going to Wentworth and playing football, the Army was easy. I had no problems whatsoever with it. I was able to get into Special Forces. The people now call it Green Berets. We don't use that term because it's a fuzzy piece of wool. And I served in Vietnam for 2 tours with that, and it was a challenge, quite a challenge to work with the mountain people, mercenaries, and I got exposed to the regular Army also, which I didn't care for so much. But I was on Okinawa with the first Special Forces group when Kissinger was negotiating with the Chinese. And they said we were potential political embarrassment, so we had to leave. And I figured then, if the Army doesn't want me, I don't want the Army. So that's when I left. I went to work for IBM as a salesman, and I stayed in the Army Reserves in an airborne Special Forces unit.
Were you living in Miami?
I was living in South Florida. That's where the job was. And when I got out of the Army, the IBM gave me 3 choices, and I took Miami because I thought it had more potential for business. But when I retired, I got out. I was tired of Miami.
Now, Sam, I know, tell us about, in Vietnam, the units, you know, either the 5th or the 7th, I don't know.
It was the 5th Special Forces Group. What it was, you know, if people don't understand that Special Forces are not door kickers like the SEALs. The idea is to train indigenous personnel as an extra force. And they put us up in the mountains with these mountain yard people, which were like a great deal like American Indians. They were not ethnic Vietnamese. We had to recruit them, train them, feed them, clothe them, provide medical attention. And they were great people. They really were. In fact, I tried to adopt one to bring him home, but the politics and the money just didn't work out. But it was a challenge. I went through the Tet Offensive, and I look back now, it wasn't so bad. There were times that were tough. I don't tell war stories, but it was a challenge, and I'm glad I had a chance to do it. And like I said to you earlier, my idea in the Army, like anything else, the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. And that was it. Just like when you and I met down at Fort Knox, they sent me to the Armor Advanced School. Well, I didn't care for the armor. You know, those big mechanical monsters, you know, it was all maintenance. You know, get out where the troops are, where the people are. But that's why those people do everything. That's why I have a son that flies helicopters. I had no desire to ever fly helicopters. Yeah.
You're killing me here, because I was armor. And he's digging the knife. Yeah, and Sam, I know you were wounded over in Vietnam. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it wasn't so bad. We had American nurses and morphine. What more could anybody ask for? I got wounded during the Tet Offensive, the first time, and it was a shock. All of a sudden, I wasn't omnipotent. I had a weakness, a fallacy. I bled. But it was an experience. I often, like I said, the American nurses, where I was up in the mountains, these bare-breasted mountain people, to see American women with perfume and her hair put up, Mark, I couldn't begin to tell you how much that meant to us, morale. And morphine is good. Excuse me, I'm just joking about that. But yeah, it was an experience. I would have stayed forever. Things here in the States weren't very good in 1968, so I extended. But then when I got wounded the second time, I was sent home. But that turned out all right because I got sent to Fort Riley. That's where I met my wife when she was going to Kansas State. I got in the Big Brothers program. Kansas State football was winning. Life was good.
Let's get back to Wentworth a little bit. You started out as a rat, obviously.
Yeah.
Just take me through the progression from rat, and you became the Corps commander?
Well, my dad wanted me to be a musician. All I could do was carry an instrument. I wasn't good at all. But my freshman year in high school and sophomore year, I was in the headquarters company, the band. And it had college students, where all the other companies were either all college or all high school. And that was a big influence on me, that they had these older men around, and I couldn't be the smart ass I probably would have been, excuse the expression. But after 2 years, I left the band to make room for somebody else. And I went to C Company, where I became a first sergeant. And that was one of the influences of my life, because I went from there to being a first sergeant, next year to being a platoon leader. I was later a company commander, then a brigade commander. And those leadership experiences at Wentworth helped me a great deal in life, not so much as in the Army as elsewhere. That I was in charge, I had responsibility. That's the thing that bothers me now that I'm retired. I have no responsibility. But I had responsibility as a young person, and I had to speak in front of others, just like in football. I was a quarterback, I called plays. And I have always, I have never had any problem with public speaking. You know, some people really fear from it. But to me, yeah, even if I don't have, I'll talk to that tree if it'll stand still. I say that in jest, but those leadership opportunities as a first sergeant, as a platoon, as a company commander, they were great learning experiences. They really were. And I'm very thankful. I couldn't have gotten that anywhere else. You can't get that. I know when I was a Boy Scout leader, I tried to instill some of that in my scouts, but it didn't carry over. It wasn't the same because we didn't have the organization, the regimentation, the schedule. You know, anyway, so that was a very important part, and there were many people that helped. Like in the military, the RTT department had some people that really been influencing me. Robert P. Oglesby, Major Oglesby was one of them. He's the one that influenced me to go into Special Forces. He gave me a brochure on it, and I thought, what is all this about? I wanted to be a grunt, you know. But the man made a big influence on me as a person, and he impressed upon me the responsibilities and to take charge, and that's about what it amounted to.
Yeah. Now, when you got commissioned, do you remember who swore you in?
No, I don't. I really don't. It happened in the lobby at Wentworth. It was during the summer, and I don't really remember. I remember I took it, and I could hardly wait to get in the Army. I could hardly wait. I mean, I don't know. It just growing up in Wentworth. One thing about Wentworth, it gave me a sense of patriotism that I don't think I could have gotten somewhere else. Many people, you can get it anywhere, but you know, we saluted the flag every morning and every night. We said the Pledge of Allegiance in class in the morning. That's carried on to me. A little side story on that. When I taught, we gave the Pledge of Allegiance, and I had one morning when my class was Mexican, and I felt awkward for him, so I had him bring a Mexican flag, and he would say the Mexican flag and Pledge of Allegiance in the morning. You know, just out of respect to him. But where did I learn that? I learned that at Wentworth. I learned one thing: you respect people for what they are and what they aren't. You don't have to be an All-American or a Medal of Honor recipient to be respected. You know, everybody has a skill and ability, and you take what that person has and respect it and treat them with respect. I learned that at Wentworth. You know, it sounds like I learned everything at Wentworth. Well, damn it, I did. I used to joke, if it weren't for Wentworth, I'd be on a street corner out there right now with a tin cup and a cat and a guitar and a tie-dyed shirt. I know I would have, but it helped. It helped. And since I didn't have a father image, the men at Wentworth, like your dad and so many others, were instrumental in my maturity.
Okay, very good. I've got to clear my throat. I'm not even talking. I've got to clear my throat. Do you want some coffee or anything?
No, I'm fine, Mark.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Some of the people at Wentworth that, I mean, you mentioned Colonel Sellers and Major Oglesby and those folks. Talk to me about who Norma Marion was.
Well, I was a sophomore in high school when Norma came to Wentworth. And Norma always had that smile, and she was always so positive, and she was a big influence. And she's the one that called me about coming back. Said, we have a new superintendent, he's looking for some people. Was you interested? And I came back, and I came very close to Norma, and as did my wife Caroline. Norma was probably her best friend here on campus. Norma was Mrs. Wentworth for years. You know, people came and people left, but Norma was always here. And the cadets respected her with a great deal. I want to mention one other person that made a big influence on me was Beth Hepler. Etiquette. I am so thankful I learned so much from Mrs. Hepler. You know, she was straight. She was, but she always had a smile, but she meant business. And you better keep one hand below the table and cut your meat in 3 pieces. You know, little things like that. And my boys have mentioned that they've been places, they've done things, and people said something and said, well, my dad took etiquette classes. Mark, we could sit here, I could look at all those pictures and go through the list of people that made an influence. Even people like Frank Brown. I never had a conversation with him, but he made an impression on me.
Yes, yeah, there's a lot of folks over there.
Oh, when I come in here, between those pictures of those people and the ones over here with me and my friends, yeah, like Jim Sellers said, Wentworth didn't close, it just moved.
Yeah, So while you were progressing in rank, who were the other cadets that influenced you?
Well, my when I became a first sergeant, my company commander and a roommate was Bill Boland. And then when I became a platoon leader up in the C Company, that's when we moved to Hickman Hall, people like Stuart Wilson was my platoon sergeant. He and I are close. We communicate frequently to this day. He's one of the few people left, by the way. And Chuck Anderson was the company commander. And then when I came back, there were John Grondike and Ray Winkie. Made a big impression on me. Some good people. I met so many good people. Other cadets, faculty. The problem is, Wentworth was so big to me, 600 people at the time, you didn't know everybody. If you didn't have them in class, were on the football team with them, you didn't know them. And of course, when kids will come back that I had as students, and they've changed. They've grown up. And I say, you are? You're not this little kid anymore? Yeah? What happened? I could go on and on and on. Wendell Perry, as assistant commandant, was a big influence on me. Hard, tempered like steel, able to endure, straight, honest, no questions asked, and friendly, very friendly. You know, he had a demeanor about him that made you want to do what he was thinking, let alone what he was saying. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a big influence on me too.
Yeah.
He really was. We're going to try and get Chip Perry, his son, to be interviewed to talk about his dad. And I've got some video of his dad.
Oh, good.
Yeah, but that's a whole nother interview. But okay, I'm trying to formulate some questions because you left IBM and you came back as an instructor. And what did you teach? And
Well, it's interesting what I taught. My degree in school was in social science. I want to teach history and economics, whatever, but I taught computer science based upon my business experience. And then I did teach in business and economics. And but private school didn't make any difference. I didn't have to be certified. Yeah. But I enjoyed that. There again, I was in charge. And like I used to tell the students, I said, I don't care about the grade, that's your problem. I want you to understand. And it was so much different 20 years ago. I was trying to teach them 8 bits to a byte, and what made the systems work the way they did. Now you take it for granted. No one knows 8 bits to a byte. What will your cell phone do? That's what it amounts to.
yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you talked about the kids were different when you came back culturally. What I noticed when I came back to work over there was the helicopter parents that would swoop in.
I used to have to tell parents, when are you going to hold a child responsible for his actions? And you sent the child here to live by our rules. So damn it, let's do it by our rules and you sit back. If you don't like that, then take him away. Parents were so much different, but the values of life are different. I use a cell phone because the cell phone has changed so much. And the internet, I had a lot of kids several students that came from large high schools. And I would say they fell through the cracks. Like when I coached high school track, I had boys that went to state, qualified for state, that had not run before they came to Wentworth, but they didn't have the chance before. They were lost in the crowd. But here, somebody reached out to them and said, here, do this. I'm going to tell you where to go, when to be there, and what to do when you get there. And it worked. So many of them changed. I think a lot of it was two parents working. Parents would leave early in the morning, come home late at night. and didn't have time to spend with her children, and her children were kind of on their own. I think that's what a great deal had to do with the drug problem we've had in this country. That's Sam Ratcliffe's personal opinion. Yeah.
Well, it's viable. At some point, I think you were working there when co-eds came in.
Yes, Crystal Lunt, one of the very first ones, wanted me to do something like this. To what it was like, I was a commandant then on an interim basis with girls, and it was different. Of course, I was the only child. I have 3 sons. I had a wife, a mother, and a female dog. I didn't know anything about women, and it was different. And the girls came to Wentworth for different reasons than necessarily the boys. That was a challenge to be, and I wasn't very understanding in some cases, because with boys, as you well know, you can snap your finger and say, do it, and they will. You try that with a girl, and she'll say, well, I don't know if I can do it, and then they'll cry. And little things about, I had a rule in class, you couldn't, once class started, you couldn't touch your hair, because they wanted to fiddle with their hair all the time. Little things like that. That was hard for me because I had come from a different environment. Wentworth was all male when I was there. When I went to the Army, it was all male. When I went to IBM, it was mostly male. Very few women. So, and the teenage girls, Lord. But it worked out. One of them, the girl I mentioned before, she asked me to walk her down the aisle when she got married. And I appreciate that. So, it worked out in the long run, but it was difficult. It was different for me.
Yeah, me too. I had a little trouble with it, but I think with our society today, the females have been more accepted, and there's more opportunity, especially in the service.
Yes.
You want to talk about that?
Well, when I was in the infantry, there were no women. But one of my last jobs in the service, I had a data processing office, and there were women in the data processing office. But they had skills there. It wasn't like in the infantry, and I had to adjust my own stuff. I couldn't be so gruff and spit-shined, to be more understanding, be more personal and personally involved with the ladies and understanding. And it was much different. But it's for the better. It's for the better. As long as someone is qualified to do something and aren't given a position just because they are or whatever, it makes all difference. Because that's one thing I learned in football and combat. You didn't care who the person was. If they could get the job done, you're fine. And I think too often that's not the case today. People are given something because, not of their abilities, but because of an image.
But you learned all that from Wentworth.
Well, I did, because it was, we only had 3 or 4 women at Wentworth when I was here, besides the secretaries up in the administration building, the librarian, Mrs. Hagan, Mrs. Britta, the registrar, Mrs. Slayton, and Mrs. Gibbons. It taught down the, one thing with that, we learned to respect women. Boy, you opened the door. You pulled a chair out. That's what you did. And that's just the way it was. And maybe people might call it old school, but I like that. It gets back to what would Colonel Sellers say? What would his opinion be? Yeah. I'm sure many people would have gone other places and had the same feelings. But Wentworth was Wentworth. Bless your heart. Wentworth that we love so well will always be true and will stand by you. Wentworth that we love so well. I think this building here and the new building down the street are examples. Look at all the alumni that I call have come out of the woodwork. My bank account's not as nice as the museums, but people have come out because they wanted to maintain what was there. We were all hurt. I went through a period I finally got over being mad and sad. How could that happen? but you knew it was going to happen someday. That's just a sign of the times.
Yeah, that hurt.
Yeah.
Let's say 2 words, and let's see what he does here. Ham fat.
Ham, fat, dingbat, hogwash, by gosh, hip, hip, hooray, WMA, sis, boom, ba, red and white, rah, rah, rah. That's a silly cheer, but we did it, and that's the way it was. And that was tradition. And I don't know what it means, but that's just it. And
Okay, we have to take a quick break.
Sure.
Okay, I've got to go to the restroom real quick.
Yeah, no problems there.
Would you like some water or something?
I'll get more coffee and a cigarette.